Episode 3 of Lazarus Project Season 2 starts with Bryson at the Time Initiative HQ in 2024. This is where he first meets Janet and introduces himself as her handler. He's going to accompany her all the way back to 2012. Janet promises to kill Bryson and the other agents if they use Becky as a weapon against her. Bryson, though, shrugs it off and doesn't seem too fazed. The 23rd experiment is when Janet and Bryson are both sent back together, right after Becky. When they emerge in 2012, back at the Time Break facility, they find Becky alive and well. Bryson snaps a picture of the trio together and sends it back to the past. This paves way for the present, where Becky shows up and begins firing at Bryson. He scarpers, which allows Becky to catch up with George at a cafe. She discusses the experiment and how they eventually ended up back in 2012 and working with Dr. Gray. Things were good until one night. Gunshots and shouting paved way for the facility under attack and burning down. With smoke in the hallways, Becky overhears Janet speaking to a man clad in black, saying, "Ross, please don't hurt her." This is the last thing she remembered before blacking out. Becky had no life here in 2012, of course, and without any record of her, Becky was put in care homes and moved about. So how did she end up on the train? Well, a couple of days before her birthday, Becky received a letter through the post with details surrounding a lockbox at the university. Inside is a gun and a note confirming she needs to be on the train at that time to save George's life. Becky is convinced that George is the one who sends the lockbox in the future, because Becky is part of the causal time loop. Meanwhile, Samson knows where the serum is and tells Wes as much over the phone. It's a private lab in Sydney, and Wes wants Archie and Zhang to go together, whom she learns is now together. They find their target there, Dr. Fang, and subsequently cut his hand off, with plans to use this to get into the lab with it. Unfortunately, it turns out to be a retinal scanner, so they need to do the loop all over again and take a different body part, in a morbidly amusing scene. George ends up speaking to Sarah about the Becky situation, forgetting that she's also part of the Lazarus Project. He apologizes for putting pressure on her and admits that he misses her. Midway through talking, though, Bryson shows up and shoots Sarah in the head. He also shoots George too and begins choking him out until he dies. The loop restarts, and this time Becky is there to confront George. Elsewhere, Zhang and Archie manage to find the serum and bring it back to the Lazarus Project. When they get there, Samson is on hand for more doomsday news. Apparently, they're losing time. 8 seconds to be precise. This means that the degrading of time and the collapsing of the loop is occurring. If they can't find a way out of this, the entire universe is going to fall apart. Before Wes can speak to Becky and George, Raprov shows up with a knife and holds Zhang up at knife point. He's livid about her being part of the kidnapping squad for Becky. Just before things blow out of proportion, George admits that Becky is back. He breaks his vow, but doesn't reveal anything about the causal loops. Becky is not happy when she finds out that George has betrayed her trust, but eventually concedes and agrees to talk to her father. Rabrov shows up and learns that Janet apparently didn't make it. The pair end up hugging as Rabrov apologizes for what's happened. Rabrov notices that the picture of Janet, Becky, and Bryson has some writing, which he interprets as code. This brings them over to the university again, and specifically the office. Rabrov finds a hollow panel, which paves way for an instruction manual of sorts to be shown off. They bring it back to the Lazarus Project, where Samson realizes the entire book is a manual relating to building a time machine. With the help of some high-tech gizmos, Samson is confident that they can have this machine send them back to about a month before the loop. This would stop everything, and, hopefully, save the world. In private, George speaks to Archie about his theories, including how Wes is seemingly at the top of this antagonistic hierarchy. Either way, the gang gets set to jump back and bring Janet home. As they fly, though, the Dane suddenly drops the plane down hard, sending all the unstrapped passengers flying in the air. If they die here, they're well and truly going to die, so everything is left on a precarious knife edge. The episode review. Things are just starting to get complicated now, and with the plan in place to jump back through time, the big talking point comes from Wes and how she slots into all of this. The mystery continues to deepen surrounding this, but then the drama involving the loop starting to degrade, along with Bryson's involvement in all this, poses a very interesting dilemma too. There's some urgency thrown into the show now that we know these loops aren't infinite, And given how many times they've cycled around, it's getting to crunch time now. The ending is certainly dramatic though, and thankfully we don't have to wait too long to find out what happens next.